Wheelhouse DNA.
And we had little Elvis running around. He had just started walking, so he was full on entertainment. So yeah, you would catch yourself laughing and you would feel guilty. But then if I would lay in bed and cry all day, I felt guilty for doing that too, because I was a mother to a 1-year-old little boy. And I knew that Nick would be like, honey, get out of bed. Come on. Get up, do something.
From Wheelhouse DNA and Acast, this is Comfort Food, a show about life, loss, grief, celebration, and the meals that support us through it all. I'm your host, Kelly Rizzo. When I think of my guest today, the words joy and resilience come to mind. She lost her husband to COVID-19 in 2020, but despite that heartbreak, she's been able to achieve some incredible career accomplishments, all while showing up as a single mom for her son Elvis. She's a performer extraordinaire, as a television personality on The Talk, a fitness instructor, celebrity trainer, a dancer, and an actress. It feels like there's nothing she can't do. Here today in the studio, we have my dear friend, the one and only Amanda Kloots. Amanda, I am so happy you are here. Thank you for joining me on Comfort Food. And I just want to get into a little bit about how we first met, which we have told this story before, but for people who might not know, yes. We met, I believe it was February 2022. Mm-hmm. It was just a few weeks after, maybe a month after I lost Bob.
I think it was a month.
Yeah.
I remember it being a month. Steve Leder introduced us.
Yeah, so
via
Rabbi Steve Leder, who was Bob's rabbi and became a really good friend of yours after you lost Nick, just through the whole grieving process.
Yes.
He reached out to me and said, I think you should meet Amanda Kloots. And the funny thing was literally that day, I had been going through your Instagram because I had known of your story.
Right.
And I went through your Instagram. And I remember I wanted to see the first post you did after losing Nick where you were happy, or acting happy.
Yeah.
Or at least having a smile on your face.
Yes.
And I remember I was like, how long after could she do that? Yeah. Or at least put on a smile for the masses.
Right.
And Steve reached out to me that day and I was like, oh my God,
it's a sign.
I was just thinking of her. I would love to meet her, please.
Yeah.
And he hooked us up and then we went and got coffee.
You know what's so funny about that? And I don't even think I've thought of it until now, but the thing with grief is, and you know this, and you even know this probably even better than me because you were surrounded by comedians when you lost Bob, but you smile, you laugh, you cry, you have a panic attack, you're laughing again, all in the same day. The day it happens, the next day. So what's crazy is you said, I was searching for the post that you posted that you were happy. It's so crazy because it's like a stigma that we can't be happy. Of course you're not happy. No. You're not happy. You know what I mean? You just lost the love of your life. You're not happy. But grief days are filled with all the emotions. And it's just so silly to think that we do censor ourselves so that we don't look happy right away. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's so, in trying to remove the stigma of grief, it's so wrong that we even have to do that.
You're right. And I was so focused on that because you and I, unlike so many people, had to go through this very publicly.
Yeah.
And my loss was very sudden. Yours was torturously not sudden, but we still had to do it publicly and in this big way where, we had all these eyes on us. And I just want to get your thoughts and how that felt for you at the time, because there's no guidebook on that.
Yeah.
And there's no, you can get all the grief books in the world and there's not how do you do this with hundreds of thousands of people on Instagram watching you and People magazine articles coming out about you? There's no roadmap for that. So how did you find that? How did you get through it?
Well, for me, it was, you have to remember the time it was. We were all completely isolated, living in this very scary world of this pandemic that nobody knew what to do in. And it was literally the wild, wild west. And so ultimately, social media, going through what I went through with hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, saved me because I had a community of people to go through with it, instead of being by myself. I don't know if that would be the same case now, but at the time when we were all stuck in our homes doing nothing, needing people, needing things to do, and needing a community, it saved me.
And you really, truly had a special community evolve around you. Obviously, there was the public aspect of it where you had this, strangers who you didn't know, obviously just on social media.
All over the world.
Were supporting you. But then you were pretty much living in a new city.
Yeah.
And you were living in a new neighborhood that you were so excited about. And you had like actual neighbors and new friends and like people just pop up around you that became a new community.
Yeah. The Laurel Canyon, one of my amazing neighbors, Jono is his name. Hey, Jono, if you're listening.
Shout out.
Shout out to Jono Hart, and my friend Molly Tuttle and Trevor Tuttle, and some musicians that were in the neighborhood at the time. Anyways, they started doing these Sunday concerts for the community. And every Sunday they had this like outdoor concert. So every Sunday, and I was usually there home because I was home from the hospital. If I had been from the hospital, we would all go down and sit outside, and the whole neighborhood would come together, and we would be singing Our House. We would sing Live Your Life for Nick. We would sing all the like Canyon songs, all the songs from the 60s and 70s that were written right on that street. And we really looked out for each other. I mean, Jono's sons would deliver us vegan muffins on their skateboards in the morning. And I mean, it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. It was like, in a way, you like yearn for those times because you were so close to these people. And it was, you know what I mean? It was like how life should be in a way,
Isn't that weird that the darkest, most sad, painful time of your life, you have these beautiful memories. Yeah, beautiful memories that, as you just said, it's so strange to want to think back and be like, I wish I could go back there. But there was like the week after Bob passed, once again, this was, you were going through this while Nick was still around. Like you were visiting him and then going through this shared community experience. With me, it was, let's say, the week after Bob passed, when all these people were coming to the house and everyone was just surrounding you and everyone's sharing Bob's stories. And I mean, it was horrific because we're all devastated and crying. But at the same time, there was this comforting sense of just having these loved ones around you, which, I mean, it wasn't often where all of us would get together and just spend hours and hours and hours together. And so
telling stories and jokes and cooking food. And
it was upsetting what brought us together, but the fact that we were together, it made it comforting in a sense. And you just mentioned music, especially, I mean, come on, Laurel Canyon, like the most historic place where some of the most incredible songs in the world were written. Yeah. You're in that aspect, but then let's say that brings us to food too. So you had the music bringing you together and comforting you. Yeah. But then food, I'm sure, especially when you're grieving, there is a food that's a comforting element as well. Yes. And of course, the show is comfort food.
Comfort food.
So, what aspect did, let's say, food play in all of this for you? And then I want you to tell me a little bit about what your favorite comfort food is, because we may or may not have it for you.
Yes. So it was very comforting, the food, because of what you said. So at the time I was living in this small little cabin, my friend's guest house, and my sister and my brother were living with me for most of it. And then, they are both really good cooks, and Anna is an amazing baker. My brother was making, when it was just my brother and I remember like taking huge naps and coming out, and he was like making homemade chicken noodle soup. And I was like, Biggie, I call him Biggie, it's his nickname. Like, where did he was like, well, you had somebody brought you a roasted chicken, so I just made the broth. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, he had some he's like, he has some vegetables left over. And I was like, I look in that fridge and see nothing. And he saw homemade chicken noodle soup. Or I would wake up in the morning and Anna wouldn't have been able to sleep, and freshly baked banana bread was, coming out of the oven, or cookies. And so it really was that. And, if I had a long day at the hospital, I would come home, and we had, Sarah Michelle Gellar started this meal train for us for like 3 months. We didn't even worry about dinner. Every night at 7:30 p.m., some food showed up, and they would, my brother and sister would wait for me, and we would all sit down and have this like family dinner. And so you're right. It was very, very comforting. My comfort food of choice, though.
I love this.
Has nothing to do with COVID or anything in that time, but it is a simple, not gourmet, simple grilled cheese with my favorite kind of French fry, which is a waffle fry.
Well, Amanda.
Well,
our magic little grilled cheese fairies and elves are going to be bringing that in here in just 1 second. So far on the episodes of Comfort Food we've done, we've sourced them from a restaurant, but I was like, no, we're going to make this homemade.
Ooh, I love it.
Because we didn't want to take the chance that it was going to be too fancy or gourmet.
Well, you can
very
get
specific, saying not fancy or gourmet.
Yes, because this comes from living in New York City for 19 years, this grilled cheese comfort food.
Thank you.
Wow, look at it. Here it is. Yummy. Even cut in triangles. Fantastic.
I know, right? And
ketchup. Amazing. Thank you. Yes. So this, I lived in New York for 19 years before I moved here. And, New York City diners are the best. And whether you're there for breakfast, lunch, or at 4 a.m. after clubbing all night, which I did do that as well.
You can't not do it if you're in New York
exactly,
at some point.
My 20s. I would always get a grilled cheese and French fries. And there's, diners usually have waffle fries for an extra like $1.50. And, I just think it's like the best comfort food. It just hits the spot every time.
It does. And whether it's, as you said, late night, or maybe the next morning after too many drinks one morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you don't feel like going out and getting McDonald's,
mm-hmm.
you can just make yourself a grilled cheese at home.
And it works.
And this is, okay. Ooh, they
did a great job.
This is very nice and melty.
Here's the key. And why I said not gourmet, because it has to be American cheese. It has to. And when you go gourmet, they try to get fancy. And I'm not saying a fancy grilled cheese is not good. Believe me, it will get me every time as well. But there's just something so good about American cheese. And also growing up as a kid, I feel like my dad would make us grilled cheeses a lot because, there was mm-hmm. 5 kids in my family. And so, you can have a cheap meal for 5 kids.
Well, this is what brings you back to childhood.
Yeah.
Like the fancy stuff isn't going to do that. And this is very, this mm-hmm. is just, I do think we added a little mayo to the bread too. But it's mayo on the bread with some butter and 2 slices of American cheese.
Very
nice and
fancy.
Toasty.
Very, very fancy.
And then those waffle fries
good.
For you.
Simple, but good. Yeah. The mayo, that's a fancy move. Yeah. But no, it's very good. It's perfect, Kelly. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. But the point is, because obviously getting into some of these discussions about times that were more difficult, times that were hard, times that can bring us back to a sad place or a dark place, like let's alleviate that a little bit and make it at least more palatable to, by having this comfort food meal here that brings us back to a happy place. Even if it's a meal that you had during those dark times, mm-hmm. it can still bring you back to like a happy place.
Yeah. Well, it just makes you feel like at home.
But so aside from, let's say, people in your community, in your neighborhood, friends, family, cooking for you, singing songs, that whole community element, what would you say was the most helpful to you when you were going through the process leading up to, the 90 days where he was in the hospital, and then also afterwards, when you're now in full grieving mode versus all hope is gone, because you had like the hope period, and then obviously then it's like, okay, the loss period.
Well, I do think that the hope period, now looking back, I realized I was already starting my grieving, even though I was so hopeful. Once Nick lost his leg, I knew our lives would never be the same. Yeah, I never thought he wouldn't make it, but I knew like our lives are now going to be very different.
Right.
And then when I was told like every day he was in rehab every day he's in the ICU is a month in rehab. So then I started calculating that, and I was like, oh, he's going to be in rehab for like years, possibly. So I realized I started grieving way before I actually had to start grieving, you know? I think ultimately what saved me once he passed, I think, was definitely Elvis. Because Nick's mom told me this. Nick's mother lost her husband 3 years before Nick passed away. So she was a widow. And when Nick was in the hospital, she sat me down one day and she said, if he doesn't make it, you're going to be okay. She gave me this huge speech. And I was like, Mom, don't talk about and she was like, no, Amanda, you're going to be okay. Elvis is going to save you. He's going to give you a purpose every day to wake up and to smile and to play and to laugh and to, think about something other than yourself and how sad you are. And she was right. I slept with Elvis every single day because I needed the cuddles. And I would wake up and the first thing I would see is his little face, and he would open his eyes and he would start smiling at me and laughing. And it was like, the best way to start the day, even if that day was the day after I lost Nick. And I'll never forget, this was crazy. Nick passed away in the morning. And so after we left the hospital, we came home and my girlfriend Rachel was watching Elvis. And I walked into the house and she was holding Elvis, and I grabbed Elvis and I gave her a big hug. And I took Elvis to the room that I was staying at this house that we were in. And it was like 11 o'clock, maybe 11:30 in the afternoon, not his nap time at that time. But I grabbed him and I locked the door and I laid down in the bed with Elvis, like literally just after spending a night at the hospital and losing Nick and having to put him away. And I crawled into bed with Elvis and I cuddled him up and we passed out together for 3 hours wrapped in each other's arms. Before I fell asleep, I looked at him and I said, it's you and me, kiddo. I said, it's you and me. And we passed out and we slept for 3 hours together. And it's like, I know, he saved me. Like he knew it. It was weird, Kelly. Like I remember looking at him and he looked at me like, I got you, Mom. He got it. It's so weird. He's such an old soul, such a cool kid.
He is. And what kills me from that story, though, is also just how Nick's mom, who I know you lost much more recently.
Yeah.
That she was able to say that to you, knowing that she had gone through it, knowing that, it's like, she's like, hey, if you're going to be in my position one day, I'm telling you, you can get through this.
Yeah.
But to have that foresight to also be able to comfort you in that moment and say, you can do this, Elvis is going to get you through this.
I know.
And
she was losing her son.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. How can, the thought of being able to even speak at all, let alone impart words of wisdom onto somebody.
Yeah. She was an incredible woman. Really incredible woman. So selfless and she would always say this, she grew up in a family that didn't give hugs and didn't say I love you. So she was just very stoic and strong, but full of love and loved her kids and loved her family so much. And Nick was her firstborn. So yeah, we were in the hospital and she pulled me aside to give me advice as she was losing her son.
Yeah.
That
just shows how she was able to even put you and Elvis first, knowing that that's what would be most important to him.
Yeah, I know. I know she was, yeah. And then and sadly lost her in January of this year. So it's almost coming up on a year.
I mean, what that family's gone through is
It's
just
not fair.
I mean, me knowing you and like just the story you just told about you and Elvis like cuddling on that day, me knowing the kind of mom you are, and you being very open about that, putting that out there. Did you still ever get people who were like, this is how you should parent during grief?
Yeah. I mean, there's always,
Aside
unfortunately,
from, let's say, an online
yeah,
troll where we just don't pay attention to that anyway, of course.
there have been a couple judgments about like how much I work or, when I'm away, you need to be home with your son. You're away too much. You're traveling too much. You're working too much. There's been that. To which I say, I agree, but I'm a single mother who has to do everything. I now have Elvis's life in my hands, and I want to give him everything I possibly can. I promised that to Nick. And also, I love to work. I like working. I like creating. I like feeling important. I like going to do things. You know what I mean? So it's a twofold. I don't ever really let it bother me too much. And if somebody's really mean, I'll just like block or restrict them. Or sometimes I'll write back and try to make them see their error in their ways and then apologize, hopefully, because I think people are quick to judge. But that's the extent of it. Other than, you do something and they're like, his car seat straps are wrong. Make sure you, and in that respect, you're kind of slightly annoyed, but also like, well, thanks.
I know. Car seat straps?
I mean, it's
thanks.
like, some people can't help it. And sometimes you're like, okay, they thank you actually, even though it's annoying, but thank you. But, I don't know. Yeah. Luckily there hasn't been too much of that. I haven't had to deal with Elvis's grief yet. It's coming. Some things have started to pop up. He does ask me questions about dying and death and where's dad and can I go visit him? And this was a sad one, but just getting sadder. No, but it was
Bring it on, girl. Bring it on. We can handle it.
Nick's birthday was September 17th, and I always celebrate it because I want Elvis to.
Yeah.
I love celebrating birthdays, and birthdays are a very hard day for me. My birthday, Elvis's birthday, Nick's birthday are still some of my hardest grief days. And so, anyways, I go out to dinner and we celebrate Nick, and so we got all dressed up. And I told him, I was like, we're going out to dinner tonight to celebrate Dada. We're going to get dressed up. And he goes, will he be there? Oh. Ooh. And so, like, it's those kinds of things right now that I'm dealing with Elvis, where you're just like daggers to the heart. And then you have to figure out how to explain it to a 4-year-old without him getting confused,
Yeah, because you never really know exactly, like they can mimic what you said, but you don't know how much of it they really understand. Like when my nieces just came to visit me for the first time a couple weeks ago, Alex, she goes, well, where's Uncle Bob? And she goes, wait, is he in heaven? And we're like, yeah. And then she goes, Mommy told me that he died. Like, is that true? And then I was like, wait, did my sister really tell her that? Or am I like breaking this news to her? And I was like, Kimmy, did you? And she's like, yeah, I told her. I was like, yeah, he did. And, he's in heaven and this and that. But then they kind of forget. And then it comes back again. Like, well, where's Uncle Bob? And I'm like, because you don't really know how much they understand. And she's only a little bit younger than Elvis. So.
Yeah. It's like, yes, you can tell in their little brains, they're trying to figure things out or piece things together. And it's heartbreaking. And it's usually like, he'll ask me on the way to preschool. So I'm like, oh gosh, you're like just starting the day off and you're like, whew, okay. So anyways, yeah, but it hasn't been too bad. I will say, I think because, my social media really grew over COVID, so that my followers that follow me are good people that have been very supportive of my life and what I do and the things that I create and my life since Nick. And so it's been good. I would say 90%, and
Right.
then you have like the horrible 10.
Right. And it's the same thing that I've truly felt too, is most of the people in our social media communities, like they're there because either they love me and want to support me, or they loved Bob.
Yeah.
Like you had a very beloved husband too. And these were probably people who were like, oh, I loved him, so now I want to support her.
Yeah.
So it's that same general, vibe of people just wanting to be supportive, or, they really want your fitness tips and your all that stuff. Or for me, it's like they want my recipes, whatever it is. I don't think either of us have had that persona where we're like inviting, judgment, critique, trolls, all that stuff.
Yes.
Where some people are a little bit more polarizing in that aspect, where it's like it's more of a breeding ground for that. And I don't really think we've had that.
No, yes. My page is positivity.
Exactly. Well, you literally have your positive thought, AK's positive thought of the day.
If you don't want to be positive, you shouldn't follow me.
Right, like, you don't want happy thoughts, don't be here. But I remember, this brings me back to one of the very first things we talked about when we first met, the first time we got coffee, because this is a concept that I feel is maybe not addressed enough in this world of, I hate the word widow. I know. Hate it. I hate it so much. I don't identify with it. I don't like it, but for all intents and purposes, and for a definition aspect, let's use that term.
I know.
But especially on the younger side, when you lose your husband at around, let's say, in your 30s, in your 40s, even in your 50s.
Yeah.
And you start thinking about moving forward. I don't even like saying moving on, because you're never moving on. No. Moving forward in that world of, meeting somebody new. I remember I asked you, because you're a year and a half ahead of me. And even though at the time we met, I was only like a month into it, it's still on your mind of like, this is going to be my life one day.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's that like?
Yeah.
And you said, it was upsetting the first time I ever mentioned anything like that. I think whether it was on your show or somewhere you mentioned something publicly, you said you got some backlash for it.
Yes, correct. I did. I made a little thing. I said something on the talk. It wasn't like an official Amanda's now dating statement, but it was something, that sparked interest. I got backlash. And when something like that comes at me in my life and I know that it is completely ridiculous and wrong, I just face it head on. So what I decided to do was, I had met a widower through Instagram, and we had been Instagram friends. We still are. I've never met him in person. We're just widower Instagram buddies. He's a dad. He has 3 kids, and he lost his wife to breast cancer. And so I said, I reached out to him. I said, Brandon, will you go live with me and talk about dating and how awful it is? And let's put this stigma that we're like back dating and like we don't care about our people anymore because we're like now dating, like woo. And he was like, please, let's do this. And so we got on a live and just had this super honest talk about what it is like going on a 1st, 2nd, 5th, 10th date after losing your person. And it put everybody to rest. I didn't get a single hate after that because it was like,
good.
It was like, oh, right. I'm sitting on my couch next to my husband or wife that's still alive, judging you, and I have no right to do that.
And not knowing that you, like on any date, you're probably, your mind is spinning on the way there. Your mind is spinning on the way home. You've probably even cried on the way there or on the way home thinking about like, oh, this feels so weird. You know what I mean?
The first date was terrible. I remember driving there. I was still wearing my wedding ring because I wore my wedding ring for, I think, like a year and a couple months after losing Nick. So I was wearing my wedding ring. I was driving to this restaurant. It was a friend of a friend. He was going through a divorce. So I was like, okay. I was like, what do I do with this? What do if I take it off, I feel like I'm like cheating on Nick, which is ridiculous. But if I leave it on, the guy's going to be like, whoa, like, are we on a date? Like, is she ready to be on this date? Like, she's still wearing. And I know I shouldn't even care about what he's thinking. I should only really care about like how I'm feeling, and I should be confident in whatever choice but I was literally like driving, taking it on and off, on and off. I left it on. I park. I remember being so nervous for this date. We go through the date. I remember wanting to just leave though. Like at one point, even though it was a lovely date, I was like about to have a panic attack. I walked to my car and I got out of my car and I bawled. I cried so hard I couldn't drive home. I had to pull over to the side of the road and call my girlfriend, and she had to calm me down before I could even finish driving home. Not because the date wasn't awful. The guy was wonderful. He was so nice. We had a great time. But it was literally just that, like, I couldn't believe that this is my life now, that I don't have my person. And it was just a huge major reality check. And it was awful. And yet, you know, people on Instagram are like, I can't believe you're dating again. Don't you care about your husband at all? And you're like, are you kidding me? I would die to have my husband back. I don't want this to be my life. I don't want to go on a date.
Oh, remember? Yeah, we would talk about that. We're like, oh, this seems awful. Like, I don't want to do this, be on the stupid apps and like be like, oh, what do you do for how many brothers and sisters do you have? You know, or like, oh, that is not what I wanted to do.
So hard.
Did not see this in, you know, like on the bingo card for this year, but here we are. So what do we do?
Yeah. And I love being in a relationship. I love having a man in my life. I want that again so badly. So it's not an option. I'm not just going to sit at home.
Right.
Like, I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, but at least I'm happy to know. I mean, I'm sure, you know, we've talked about this in some aspect, but that you really only got that negative, you know, feedback, judgment, whatever you want to call it, for like a hot second, and then you dispelled it and diffused it, and then it was gone. Because anyone that's saying anything, I mean, all that really matters is the people closest to you. Like, to me, all that mattered when, I mean, granted, of course, yes, you have to feel it in your heart and you have to feel like you're comfortable with going on a date and moving forward. But to me, all that mattered were Bob's girls.
Yeah, I
remember. When I got their blessing, which was, you know, and I probably would have had it even sooner, but it was maybe 14 months after he passed. It was like March or something. We had a talk and I was like, look, you know, I'm not ready for anything too exciting at this point, but, you know, maybe it'd be nice to like go on a hike with somebody or like go get a coffee. And they're like, Kelly,
go.
Like, what? Like, we want you to be happy. Like, he would want you to be happy. I was like, are you sure about that? I was like, I don't know. And they're like, and then that's when we separate the, you know, as I call it now, earthly Bob from heavenly Bob. Earthly Bob would have been like, how dare you? I knew you never loved me. See, like, how quickly you can move past me, you know. But heavenly Bob would be like, of course I want you to be happy.
Yeah.
So when I got their blessing and like their, you know, unequivocal, full-on, open, excited blessing. They weren't just like, I mean, you know, whatever you want. You know, they were like, no, we want you to be happy.
I know. Well, and the bottom line is like, you never know when you're going to meet somebody. Right. You know, I mean, one of my parents' friends, he lost his wife, and I think it was like a couple months later, he met somebody else. And I remember saying to my mom and dad, because I had already lost Nick, and they were like, I can't believe that he's already, and I go, stop it right now. It's so amazing that he met somebody. That's such a blessing. Like, to have somebody by your side, and if she's amazing and supporting him through his grief, and like he's finding a connection again, like, that's amazing. And whether it comes a week after, 2 years after, 5 years after, it doesn't matter. You can't judge when somebody comes into your life. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? How are we supposed to, a year, I'm going to grieve 1 year and then I'm going to be ready. No.
Right.
Or I'm going to meet the person. No.
Right. It's a nice rule of thumb. Like, for me, I knew that at least A, in the court of public opinion, but B, just even among my peers or family, I was like, 1 year seemed like the appropriate amount of time to at least, it's not saying, well, you better meet somebody the day after a year passes, but it means like in my mind, I'm like, I'm not even going to think about this for a year. And I couldn't think about it for a year.
No, I'm 100% there with you, but I'm just saying, like, in the world of judging dating after grief, I just feel like there's just absolutely no room to judge just because you could bump into somebody at a coffee shop and it could change your life in a beautiful way. And when you are grieving and you know this, you're so lost. You're so sad that any happiness that can come into your life, like, God bless. Yeah.
Amen. And that is why I remember I felt, it was maybe 4 or 5 months after I had moved into my new house already. And I had a moment where like I was kind of blasting some music and I started singing along and like dancing around my house. And then it like hit me. And then I felt so guilty for like singing and dancing alone in my own house that I was like, oh my God. I was like literally looking around like, did somebody see that?
Yeah.
Am I going to be judged for being happy? And then I started feeling guilty for feeling happy.
Yeah.
And then I've just talked to some people since, and it's like, any moment in this life that you can feel joy and happiness, you take it, because this life is short and we have no idea how long we have.
Yeah.
We could not be here tomorrow.
I know.
So if we can be happy for a minute, take it, because, you know, especially when you're grieving, if you can be happy for 1 minute, you know that the next minute's going to be down here. Yeah. So it's like, enjoy it while you can.
Absolutely. No, and you're so right. I mean, the days after Nick passed away, my whole family was still there, and Leslie was still there, and we had little Elvis running around. He had just started walking, so he was full on entertainment. So yeah, you would catch yourself laughing and you would feel guilty. But then if I would lay in bed and cry all day, I felt guilty for doing that too, because I was a mother to a 1-year-old little boy, and I knew that Nick would be like, honey, get out of bed. Come on. Like, get up, like, do something. Don't lay in bed and cry all day. So I would feel guilty being sad, and you feel guilty being happy. That's why it's just like grief is just such a, it's like this crazy, weird world that you don't understand until you're in it. You really don't.
Did you find that a routine really helped you, or was there like calm in the chaos, or did you need a routine? And I'm assuming obviously once you really started working and doing the talk, then you have a routine. But how did that play into it all? Yes,
I would say, because until I started the talk, I did not have a routine. So every day was just like a random day. We were moving out of the rental that we had. I was moving into the home that Nick and I bought now, just with Elvis and I. I had to get rid of a lot of Nick's things and a lot of our things that we had together. So like the first couple months were terrible, because it was just getting rid of things, deciding. It was just that. It was terrible. Once I started the talk, that saved my life, because I had Elvis was in preschool. I would drop him off for preschool. I would go do my job. I was surrounded by adults, surrounded by people that were making me laugh every day, having adult conversations instead of just talking to a 1-year-old every day. And I was getting clothed and make-upped. And so I felt pretty after a year in pandemic mode and being in the hospital every day. So it saved my life. A routine really, really, really helped me.
So that would be, let's say, some advice that you would give to somebody else is, like, for me, like, we didn't really have a routine, but even just something as simple as like getting up at the same time and making coffee. I mean, just something that can make you feel like a person.
Well, it's funny because a lot of times people will say, oh my gosh, you went back to work like right away. And I actually think that I get why people do. You need to do that. It's actually like, I actually feel like bereavement for a job should be something where maybe you have 2 weeks. I don't know what the allotted bereavement time. I don't think it's much, actually. But I actually think it should be something where I'm going to save it and I'm going to take it when I actually really, really need it. It might not be the day after, 2 days after, because you kind of just need to keep, like, life is still normal. You know, you're living in this like hazed reality. And so I feel like going to work might actually help somebody to stay in a routine, to feel like things are normal, and then take that bereavement time, when you need it, like maybe a month out when you're like, oh my gosh, what just happened? You know what I mean? Sometimes reality doesn't hit you right away.
Well, and I think maybe that's something that even brings it back to doing this in the public eye. I feel like if you were just a school teacher or worked in a factory or something, that if you had to go back to work because you had to feed your kid, like you would not have been judged for it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? People would be like, oh yeah, she's got to go back to work. I mean, I know people who have lost a loved one and they're literally back at work like the next week because they don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice. Yeah.
You know?
But that routine might help save them too. You know?
Right. Well, then, and
again,
that's the thing.
Don't judge anyone grieving.
Right. Because you don't, I feel like I bet the people who are judging are ones who have not gone through it, or at least not to the level, you know, like maybe they lost, you know, a cousin or something, but not
a pet or something.
Or a spouse.
Yeah.
You know, but you have also been a big proponent of, you know, really taking care of your mental health and stuff throughout all of this. And I think, isn't that how you met Rabbi Leader, was through...
He was on the talk. He was promoting his book, The Beauty of What Remains.
Right.
And he was a guest on the talk via Skype or Zoom because we were still Zooming. And I was doing my due diligence as a host of a television show. So I started reading his book. And it's beautiful. You know, it's a beautiful book and it deals with death and grieving. And so it was the only book I could read about grief. It was months after Nick had passed. I had received many, in fact, 2 to 3 copies of some of the same books. I had a pile.
Love to send the books.
Yes. And it just wasn't something that I could bring myself to do. It wasn't I couldn't grieve all day and then read about grief too. So I couldn't do it. But I could see why it would help people. But anyways, I picked up Steve's to be prepared for the interview. Fell in love with this book because of how honest it was. And I was very honest with how I was grieving and everything that I had gone through. So I felt like I really related to the book. And so then when we Zoomed, I just fell in love with Rabbi Steve and then slid in his DMs afterwards and was like, hey, can we be friends? And he was like, I know, I loved you too. And so then our relationship just blossomed from that.
Oh, that's
Love
so
that
nice.
guy.
Right. So because he had mentioned something about how you had done something with Our House, which is what is
Our House Grief is a beautiful nonprofit support group.
That's the word, everyone. Yes. Support group. I was like, group therapy. No, support group
for families that are grieving. They do an amazing job with children that, you know, like I foresee myself getting more involved with Our House once Elvis, like it hits Elvis, because they have a lot of groups for kids that would all be in his same boat. That, you know, as of right now, I don't know if I know of anyone that he could talk to about this. That's another kid. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and they were giving me so graciously an award, and so Steve introduced me at that award ceremony, and we did a little talk. So that was our house moment. Wonderful, wonderful, great resource for grief. It's so funny now thinking back to that first time I met you at that coffee shop to now. I mean, such a change. Oh yeah, I was a mess. Yeah. I was a mess. And I remember from that initial, because I mean, I was crying almost the whole time, you know, because I was a month in. Like I didn't go a day without crying for like 6 months. Yeah. And that first day I met you, we started talking. I started crying. And then you started crying, saying, you know, you're like, well, you know, it can be lonely. Like, I just really, you know, like, it still hurts. Like, here I am, you were a year and a half in at the time. And I remember being like, the fact that you were crying at a year and a half, like, somehow was very comforting to me, because I was like, it made me feel like, oh, good, even a year and a half from now, like, I'm still going to be connected to it. Like how she's still connected to Nick, even a year and a half in. It made me feel like, in a sense, because some of it you don't want to let go of. Yeah. You know? Right. You want to always keep that with you. And I was like, oh, good, she's still feeling it a year and a half in. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Which is still kind of strange. And that's something else you've said, is that you've connected happy grief versus like sad grief, like when you're thinking about Nick. And I have that now too with Bob, where you can still be experiencing the grief, but it has more of like a happy tinge to it versus a sad tinge. Like I'm sure you feel it more like if you look at a photo or like watch a video or something.
Yeah.
Where in the beginning I couldn't look at a photo or watch a video. Like I would still do it. I would
Yeah.
always do it. I would make my, like even from day one, I was looking through photos and looking through videos, but I would cry and it was so painful to look at them.
Yeah.
Whereas now I can look at a photo of him and smile and laugh and watch a video and laugh. And I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes still cry, but it's like happy grief
Yeah.
versus sad grief.
Our house actually just posted the other day on their Instagram a beautiful quote that said, "The funny thing about grief is one day, the same photo, one day will make you smile, and then the next day will make you cry." It's just what it is. It's happy grief and sad grief. Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
I
And then,
know.
I mean, you've had some other ways of even helping you get through this. Like, I mean, you've done so much stuff. Believe me, I listed your accolades before, in the intro. But, you've written now at least two. Am I missing one? But
Nope,
two.
just two.
Okay, two incredible books, which
you.
I've read both, of course.
Thank you.
How did that help you? Especially the one you just did with Elvis and for Elvis, Tell
Yeah.
Me Your Dreams.
Immensely. The children's book, I didn't, and I still don't think it's a grief book, but it's just a great, what I realized is in writing a book and then promoting the book, and because books take so long to happen, especially a children's book, the illustrator takes 8 to 9 months just to illustrate the book before you even see any of the illustrations to start talking about it.
Because you would think a children's book would be like, oh, that's so super fast.
Super fast. No. So by the time you're like doing press for it, you've had so much time to like let it marinate in your body, and then you're talking about it over and over. And what I realized for that book was that it's a great tool for parents to use to incorporate people that they've lost in their life with their children. So that's what I did with Nick for Elvis, because I'm trying to always think of ways that I can incorporate Nick into our lives so that he feels like he has memories, because he doesn't. He was 10 months old when Nick left to the hospital, so he doesn't have any memories. So I try to create memories so that he feels like he has them. Or times where, like, I truly believe Nick comes to Elvis in his dreams a lot. Nick's come to me 3 times in dreams that I remembered. So what I did was like, okay, when you go to sleep, you're going to have this awesome adventure time with Dada. But what I realized in promoting the book was that any parent could do this for a grandpa they lost, a grandma that they lost, a cousin, a friend, a sibling, God forbid. Like, you can use it as a way to, like, you're going to go to sleep now, little one, but let's have a dream about grandpa. And what are you going to do with grandpa in your dream? And then the next day it can be somebody else. And in your dreams, it can be so fantastical. So I always incorporated all the things that Elvis has loved, and, flying in clouds made of vanilla ice cream and raining rainbow sprinkles, because it's a dream. And
well, one of the things that you say that you do, I'm assuming that helps bring you peace, of course, maybe makes you feel closer to Nick, is when you always want to go by the water and go by the ocean.
Yeah.
And you do that, on like his birthdays or anniversaries? Or
Well, part of Nick's ashes are in the Pacific Ocean. Because I did that because his dads are in the Pacific Ocean. So in Costa Rica, but let's just hope that the ocean
they all meet. It all meets.
swirls
It all
and,
meets.
and all comes together. And then what's crazy is the day I did that was our anniversary, that I put his ashes in this part of the ocean in Malibu. And I said to him that day, I was like, anytime we're at the beach, if you want to come to us, like, show us like a dolphin or something. And I swear every time we're in Malibu, I see dolphins in the water, like every time. I know it's like not a random occurrence that dolphins are in Malibu, but
I never see dolphins.
Oh, really? Like
No.
literally we see them almost every time we're at the beach.
Wow.
But one of the things I did realize when I picked up Nick's ashes and opened them for the first time was how many ashes you get. There's a lot of ashes. So I've put them in the Pacific. I put them all over New York City at all of like our little favorite spots in New York, all the places that we
wow.
lived, the place that he used to always take the dogs in Central Park. I put some at our home that we bought here together in our home that I now live in. I gave some of his ashes to his family. I have some in a urn. I made jewelry out of his ashes.
Oh, wow.
And I still have a ton left. I made vases, pottery with his ashes, and I keep flowers in them at the house.
This is not, I did not know that this is just an ongoing
yes,
thing.
it is. I don't know why I thought that somebody's ashes came down to this size, but that is not the case. I mean, Nick was 6'5", so I don't know. It's awakening, eye awakening, but yeah.
I bet you find new things. You're like, I didn't even know I could do that with ashes. Like, there's new things all the time. Like,
you could get a tattoo with ashes, which could be super
cool. Do you think
cool.
you would do that?
I think I would. I still have.
We were talking about getting tattoos together. So as I said, you do not have to twist my arm. Anytime you want to go, I will go.
I know. And I have so many ideas.
I'm way too impulsive with them.
The tattoo I got for after Nick passed was this little rainbow, because rainbows were so a part of that whole journey, and it's me, Nick, and Elvis in this little rainbow.
Oh.
But I do want to do more, and it wasn't with his ashes. So yes, we could. I'm game.
There's also this guy that will come to you. So
okay.
Well, we can.
We'll do it.
We could do that too.
That'll be the podcast I start.
Okay. So what would? First off, totally random. I saw you just posted something about this end of life thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Okay, so I cheated. I saw it on Tig Notaro's Instagram, and I was like, "What's this?" Anything grief, and I'm like, that sounds interesting. So then I went on their Instagram page, and I saw that they follow me, and so I was like, "What is this thing?" I was like, "Can I be a part of this?" I was like, "This sounds really, really cool." Like, anytime anyone wants to kind of like debunk the stigmas of grief, I'm like, please, like, let's do that. Like, that's so important. And so, they were so happy to hear from me, and they luckily had extra room on their schedule right at last minute. And so I'll be closing it out with Yvette Nicole Brown, and just having a really great conversation about grief and navigating your life after losing somebody and being a parent and figuring it all out. Endwell Project is the
Endwell
nonprofit.
Project.
Yeah,
cool.
The nonprofit Endwell Project, and they're doing this symposium where they're like literally covering every topic from like caregiving to grief to everything. Like, it's really cool.
Very interesting. What would you say is, let's say, some great tools that you've learned throughout this whole process, that whether it's a tool or an piece of advice that you could give to somebody going through it, and also things to say not to do? Like, if somebody else is grieving and your friend's best friend just lost somebody, it's like they're going over to their house, like, don't do this.
Yeah.
Or make sure you do this.
Yeah. Okay. The first one I would say is something that has been that I've known, but it's been like a newer development. I would say is that healing never ends. So my advice would be to constantly try to keep working on yourself and the grief and the trauma. It never ends, because our life keeps on going. It's a constant battle. So my advice is to just constantly keep working on yourself so that you can keep evolving and growing and getting stronger, because it'll keep hitting you in all directions. But then the other thing I would say is, I met this recent widow over Instagram, and she was like asking me for advice on therapies or groups. And I said, I don't do group therapy. It's something that I haven't found yet as to be my thing. I said, but I'd be happy to meet you. I said, we could meet for a coffee or a lunch. I said, or if you want to go for a walk. She was like, let's go for a walk. I said, great. And so we met for a walk. And as soon as we started walking, she goes, oh my God, thank you so much for not going to coffee or lunch. If I have to sit through another coffee or lunch, I'm so sick of that. She's like, it felt so good that when you said walk, just to move and just to walk and talk. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Like, what? Yeah, let's move and talk and walk at the same time. So like, I think my advice to not do would just be a good friend. It's what Steve always says. Be the person, be who you are, be who you innately are around people that are grieving, right? Don't change who you are. Rabbi Steve Leder always says, be your true authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're a baker, bake. If you're a comedian, make people laugh. If you're,
Right.
you know, if you love doing the laundry and cleaning the house, come in and clean their house and do their laundry.
That makes sense.
And I think like for me, it was like, I love to move. I love to exercise. So I was like, come on, we're going on a walk. I don't know.
Which I'm sure for you has been so helpful. Like just exercise. I'm sure that really helps center you for everything. And so if that helped you so much, why would that not help somebody that you're helping?
Yeah, it still is like my saving grace mentally. I have to move something every day just to mentally feel better.
Well, and it inspires so many people also, as I'm sure you've heard over and over and over again. But I mean, even for me, not even, let's say, on the grief end, but just on the motivational end, there have been times where I've seen you, you know, do a workout or even dance, which I do not dance, but I'll see you dance. And then I'm like, all right, at least that's going to make me get up and move my butt. You know?
Good.
Yeah. So it's motivated me too. Thank you so much. I love you so much.
I love you more.
For eating grilled cheese with me.
Delicious.
And waffle fries and sharing this incredible advice, your life stories.
Thanks,
I mean,
Kelly.
Obviously what you've gone through can help so many people. I mean, you know, we think, you know, if we even can help a person that we've met, you know, like you reached out to that widow on Instagram, but like this type of thing can help so many more people. So I'm just so grateful for you in general. I'm so grateful for what you've done in my life. And, you know, I've kind of followed your lead on a lot of things and I've taken your advice and you've been very inspiring to me. So I'm just grateful to you as a friend, as a human, as a person. And
I love that we have each other.
I know. I love you so much. So let's go get a drink and maybe some tattoos. And that's that. Thanks for listening. The meal we had today in the studio was a basic grilled cheese with waffle fries. It's not really the type of thing where you need a recipe, but if you're looking for one, here it is. Take 2 pieces of bread and slather them in some mayo on the outside and butter on the inside, or however you prefer. Add some American cheese and put your sandwich together. Put a little bit of butter in the pan, heat it up, and put your sandwiches in there. Toast on one side until golden brown, then flip them over and toast the other side with the lid on so that the cheese gets nice and melty. For the waffle fries, we had them frozen, so preheat your oven and bake to the package instructions. Buon appetito, and thanks for tuning in. Comfort Food is produced by Wheelhouse DNA for Acast. Our executive producers are Fanny Baudry, Cassie Berman, Leah Sutherland, and yours truly, Kelly Rizzo. Our audio producer is Kiara Noni. Special thanks to Camila Goldenberg for production assistance. Our audio engineer and editor is Matthew Blocka. This podcast is hosted by me, Kelly Rizzo. Thanks for tuning in.